Good morning. This is Rashad Mitchell coming to you live from my YouTube channel as I continue on my part series. The week that was college football history review, 1970 college football season. Now I'm in the era of the 70s, talking about the football games that were played during the 1970s, and I will be doing the 1970 college football season, recapping it in its totality. And this video is going to be about the overview of the 1970 college football season, as well as certain milestones that stood out, as well as the AP poll, the culture changes, whatever, and then week one of the 1970 college football season. So here we go. 1970 college football season was the year of the quarterback, bowl upsets after 11 games, and aeronautic tragedy. The 1970s opened much the way the rollicking 1960 closed. Familiar names like Texas, who was winners of 20 straight games, Ohio State, winners of 18 of 19 over 2 years, Southern California and Arkansas, considered the preseason cream of the crop. Meanwhile, Penn State with 22 straight wins and 30 games without a loss, was considered barely behind the top dogs. With passing taking greater prominence in offensive game plans, 1970 became known as the year of the quarterback. Among the strong arm throwers were Lynn Dickey of Kansas State, Rex Kern of Ohio State, Archie Mann of Mississippi, Bill Montgomery of Arkansas, Jim Plunkett of Stanford, John Reeves of Florida, Pat Sullivan of Auburn, and Joe Theismann of Notre Dame. The year of the quarterback contributed to a blizzard of Heisman preview attention, jump-starting a trend that made the Heisman the most prominent sports award, in which advanced media speculation grew to play an enormous role. Sports information directors of major football schools learned that successful candidates required campaigns be launched well in advance, almost like those of candidates for U.S. presidency. Heisman candidates had to stand on a strong record. The candidate must have flashy statistics from his sophomore and junior years, have solid party backing. He must play on a team with a good record, be able to carry their region. He must move ahead of other players as the top candidate from a given sector of the country, look good in the primaries. He absolutely must play well in televised games and have a good art ad campaign. The latter often translated into the candidate becoming the subject of an appealing poster, an informative postcard, or three-dimensional graphic mailing to the voting media. Plunkett had a superb year, leading Stanford to the Rose Bowl and won the Heisman Trophy, partly because other candidates failed at critical moments of the election. Manning was assassinated figuratively, of course, when he broke his arm in mid-season. Kern peaked too soon because he had played his best ball in his sophomore year of 1968. Joe Theismann peaked too late, playing his best ball in 1970. Where did all this politicking begin? In a 1997 story in the New York Times that carved about how through polls and beauty pageants, the news media assumes control of college football near the end of every season, columnist William C. Roden revealed that Heisman hype had started at the U.S. Naval Academy of all places. Bud Thalman, one-time sports information director for the Navy midshipmen, admitted to Roden that in 1963 I did a mailing. It was 4 pages, the size of index cards. It said, "Meet Roger Staubach." Each week, Thalman would visit New York's football writers' meeting and bring along a stack of Staubach stories and stats to sell his quarterback. Roden seemed affronted at hearing of the success of Thalman's campaign management, but no football observer could rightfully argue against the merits of Roger Staubach, who claimed the Heisman and a place in college football's pantheon in 1963. And by the end of the 1970 season, the highest individual honors may have gone to Plunkett, but championship team honors were captured by the Nebraska Cornhuskers, which as the third-ranked team entering the bowl games emerged as a surprise national champion and Coach Bob Devaney's 9th year in Lincoln, making Nebraska's title possible with 2 enormous bowl upsets. First thing first, the Cotton Bowl presented a rematch from the year before between number 1 Texas and number 6 Notre Dame. The Longhorns arrived at their quasi-home game in Dallas with 30 straight wins, which was the 9th longest winning streak in history at that time. Unlike the previous January when Texas prevailed, the Fighting Irish managed to knock the Horns from the top bowl spot with a convincing 24-11 win. Number 2, Ohio State, an undefeated senior-dominated team that had won 31 of its last 32 games going back to the middle of the 1967 season, also was surprised 27-17 in the Rose Bowl by Stanford. It was the Big Ten's 3rd straight Rose Bowl loss, the onset of a painful 2-18 trend. The upsets opened the throne room to the AP poll. Could Notre Dame possibly leapfrog all the way from number 6 to number 1 after his team's 17-12 Orange Bowl win over number 5 Louisiana State? Nebraska's Devaney quipped, even the Pope wouldn't vote Notre Dame number 1. The Associated Press writers agreed, handing the Cornhuskers their first ever season-ending top vote. A new issue developed that would continue to dominate the thinking of college athletic directors to the present day. The cost of athletics came under constant examination, and the NCAA convention voted in a referendum that passed with amazing ease. Starting in 1970, schools were allowed to schedule an 11th game as a method of rescuing overtaxed athletic budgets. Ohio State, for one, still played an antiquated 9-game slate in 1970, but most schools that added an extra game looked on them as an opportunity to daringly match themselves with powerhouses from other regions. This was a pleasant 1970s trend, made evident in the season's first week, as Southern California put a 42-21 whipping on Alabama, and Stanford beat Arkansas 34-28. The Trojans' convincing win over the Crimson Tide became a landmark contest in the USC's sophomore fullback Sam Cunningham, an African-American, played brilliantly, and his performance in the Deep South, along with those of other black USC stars, helped Alabama coach Red Bryant convince his hierarchy that he needed to integrate his Crimson Tide with black players. Less than 10 years earlier, Alabama Governor George Wallace had defiantly stated the Tuscaloosa campus would never be integrated. But within the next 4 years after 1970, the Crimson Tide squad boosted several stars of African heritage, including All-Americans in defensive end John Mitchell, linebacker Woodrow Lowe, and center Sylvester Croom, future head coach of Mississippi State. They were followed by greats like Ozzie Newsome, Dwight Stevenson, E.J. Jr., Cornelius Bennett, and Derek Thomas. It was said that Bryant cracked ironically Cunningham did more for integration in Alabama in 60 minutes than Martin Luther King did in 20 years. Black players walked out because no black assistant coach had been hired at Syracuse. This action was surely a paradox, since the school had been perhaps the nation's greatest champion of African-American athletes during the 1950s and 1960s. Animosity reigned, and two former stars, militant Jim Brown, moderate Floyd Little, were pitted against each other during a conflict that boiled that into a 0-3 start for the Orangemen. Still, Syracuse rallied for a big upset of Penn State to pave the way for a winning year. Meanwhile, Iowa endured a nasty power struggle, ending in the firing of coach Ray Nagel and the resignation of athletic director Forrest Evashevsky, once the highly popular coach who had taken the Hawkeyes to 2 Rose Bowls. When Bump Elliott was hired as new athletic director, he surprisingly rehired Nagel as a coach. It was a truly tragic year. Without discrimination, death claimed footballers, young and old, famous and barely known. By far the most disquieting events came when separate airplane crashes wiped out significant numbers of the football squads of both Wichita State and Marshall. On October 2nd, on a Friday, one of 2 badly overloaded propeller-driven planes chartered by Wichita State crashed into a mountainside near Silver Plume, Colorado, on its way to Logan, Utah, for a game that next day against Utah State. The crash killed 30 people, including 13 Wichita football players, as well as head coach Ben Wilson, assistant coaches, athletic staff, and boosters. The Federal Aviation Administration determined later that the Martin 404 aircraft flying at 11,000 feet was incapable of climbing quickly enough to clear the 11,990 feet continental divide, and that it was virtually impossible to turn around and narrow Loveland Pass. 9 players survived the crash, and 33 players and coaches and fans were aboard the companion plane that landed safely. The Wheat Shockers canceled their Utah State date, but voted to play out the string with a depleted and demoralized squad. The Marshall Thundering Herd lost 17-14 to East Carolina and Greenville, North Carolina on November 14th, and a plane load of 70 players, coaches, and boosters crashed in a ball of fire while on approach to landing at Tri-State Airport near the campus city of Huntington, West Virginia. All aboard the chartered D-9 jet aircraft, Air Parrish. Rescue efforts were hampered because the only access road had been turned to mud by steady rain, although witnesses living nearby suggested no one could have survived the explosion. Although neither school touched by aeronautic tragedy had ever challenged football's elite on the field, Wichita State had enjoyed a stronger football history than had Marshall. Wichita had won or shared 5 Missouri Valley Conference championships over a 10-year span, starting in 1954. The destruction of an already slipping team would bring on a 76-loss slump in the 1970s, despite one remarkable year winning record at 6-5 in 1972. The Shockers finally quit fielding football teams after 1986. Wichita State's 89 years of football, it played a major schedule starting in 1946, produced more wins than any other discontinued program in NCAA history. Marshall, known more for its basketball prowess in 1970, picked up the pieces in 1971 under Jack Lingyall, an unknown coach who was the only one willing to take on the challenge. In 2006, a major motion picture, We Are Marshall, starring Matthew McConaughey in the role of Linger, told the story of a remarkable resurrection that the new Thundering Herd team created. Now, Marshall softened its football schedule, eventually embraced 1AA status when the lower division became available in the early 80s. After building up to 5 trips to the 1AA title game and becoming champions in 1992, 1996, Marshall re-entered major status in Division 1A football in 1997, turning out stars such as wide receiver Randy Moss and quarterback Chad Pennington. More than 30 years later, the plane crash memorial continues to actually galvanize Marshall's relatively small hunting community. On the other hand, the largest city of Wichita, ironically one of America's early aviation capitals, has moved on, hardly ever looking back, perhaps because the dead lost their lives not near home but far away in the Rocky Mountains. Milestones that took place for college football in 1970, some of them were athletic directors of major schools were allowed to add 11 games to schedules. There were 2 schools that left the small conferences to go independent, like Cincinnati and Central Michigan. The longest winning streaks entering the college football season for 1970 was Penn State with a 22-game winning streak, Texas with a 20-game winning streak, and San Diego State with a 12-game winning streak. Coaching changes that took place for 1970, Clemson had a new coach in Hootie Ingram, Colorado Jerry Wampler, Florida Doug Dickey, Miami Walt Krzyzewski, Purdue Bob DeMoss, Temple Wayne Harding, Tennessee Bill Battle, Texas Tech Jim Carlin, West Virginia Bobby Bowden, Wisconsin John Jardine. Preseason AP poll, preseason number 1 was Ohio State, followed by number 2 Texas, number 3 Southern California, number 4 Arkansas, number 5 Mississippi, 6 Notre Dame, 7 Penn State, 8 Michigan, 9 Nebraska was number 9, Stanford was number 10. Missouri, number 11, 12 Louisiana State, 13 Houston, 14 Kansas State, 15 Florida, 16 Alabama, 17 South Carolina, 18 UCLA, 19 Arizona State. And for the 20 spot, it was a 3-way tie between Auburn, Oklahoma, and West Virginia. So let's get started. The college football season started on September 11th, actually on a Friday in 1970, where Missouri shut out Baylor 38-0. Number 11 Missouri shut out Baylor 38-0 in St. Louis. College football invaded St. Louis Cardinals Busch Stadium as Missouri halfback Joe Moore, who had 171 yards and a touchdown on 36 carries, had a big night. But Baylor, trying to avoid Southwest Conference record 11 straight defeat, held Tigers to 10-0 lead at halftime and dominated third quarter until 4:37 was left. Now at that point, Missouri took over at its 28-yard line. Moore swept right through surprise pass to wide receiver Mel Gray, who wiggled out of grasp of defensive back Ed Marsh and sprinted parallel to 50-yard line to pick up wing back John Henley's block to break away for a 72-yard touchdown. Bear sub quarterback C. Souther was quickly picked off by Tigers defensive back Pete Buha, whose return went to Baylor 18-yard line. Missouri backup quarterback Mike Farmer scored on sneak and route was on. Meanwhile, North Carolina beat Kentucky by a score of 20-10. Charging to 48-yard touchdown, tailback Don McCauley had 157 yards rushing, 27 carries. Ice game for North Carolina on first play of fourth quarter, where McCauley threw 2 blocked through key block to enable Tar Heels wingback Louis Jolly to sprint 41 yards with quarterback Paul Miller's pass for 7-7 tie in the first quarter. Earlier, Kentucky earned 7-0 first quarter lead and a 10-10 halftime tie thanks to running of tailback Cecil Bowens, passing of quarterback Stan Forsley, punting of punter Dave Hart, who boomed 65 yards boot in third quarter. Next, number 3 Southern California defeated number 16 Alabama by a score of 42-21. Now, adding top shelf foe as his 11th game, Alabama coach Bill Bryant may have questioned his decision. Extending its unbeaten string to 22 games, number 3 Southern California used its big offensive line to roll back Crimson Tide for 485 yards rushing. Fullback Sam Cunningham's varsity debut was outstanding. His first carry went for 16 yards, and later on 4th and 1, Cunningham ran for 135 yards on 12 carries, tore through left tackle Marv Montgomery's block for a 22-yard touchdown. Cunningham's second touchdown came after defensive back Tyrone Hudson's 32-yard punt return provided 12-0 lead in the first quarter. Troy led 22-7 at halftime. An 89-yard trip for a touchdown drive that they had after second half kickoff wrapped it up. Now, trailing 32-7 in the third quarter, Crimson Tide went to aerial attack, 232 yards total for touchdown catch by David Baylor, who had 101 yards receiving on 7 catches. Bama tailback Johnny Musso was held to 41 yards rushing on 15 carries but scored twice. Next, the Florida Gators, number 15 team in the country, defeated Duke 21-19 as the Gators held on for a win despite 2 late Duke touchdowns in the fourth quarter after having received doctor's approval to test his gout-plagued knees. Superb Florida wide receiver Carlos Alvarez returned first punt of his career and zigzagged 67 yards to touchdown, which provided a 21-6 lead late in the third quarter. Earlier, Alvarez, who had 70 yards receiving on 4 catches, caught 46-yard toss by quarterback John Reeves to set up first of 2 touchdown runs by tailback Tommy Dorrance. Blue Devils lost chance to add 10 points in the first half, but fullback Steve Jones lost fumble at Gators' 3-yard line, and kicker David Wright missed 25-yard field goal, although he made 2 on either side of half. Duke quarterback Leo Hart broke Norm Snead's ACC career passing yard record of 4,040 yards. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech upset number 17 South Carolina 23-20. Sophomore Eddie McAshan ignored pressure of being the first black football player at Georgia Tech and first black quarterback in a major Southern program. He passed 20 of 38 for 202 yards, a touchdown to beat Gamecocks. Fullback Steve Harkey was favorite target, catching Georgia Tech record to date 14 passes. Southern California earned 14-10 lead at halftime and 2017 third quarter leads as running back Billy Ray Rice ran for 2 touchdowns after interceptions and quarterback Tommy Suggs flipped touchdown pass. Nebraska, number 9 team in the country, beat Wake Forest by a score of 36-12 as Demon Deacon scored first after safety Frank Fussell recovered from by Nebraska tailback Jeff Kinney. Cornhuskers held, however, and Wake Forest kicker Tracy Lonsbury booted a 35-yard field goal. Nebraska Lightning offense struck for 2 quick touchdowns. It went 63 yards as quarterback Jerry Tagg passed 45 yards to wide receiver Guy Ingles to set up halfback Joe Aduna's 5-yard touchdown. When Wake fumbled after the next kickoff, Kinney made up for his bobble with touchdown plunge after a 26-yard trip. The Deacons authored a 72-yard quick kick on next possession. Nebraska's answering punt from end zone was state blocked for safety by Wake cornerback Pat McHenry. Leading 14-5, Nebraska went 81 yards to Tagg's 13-yard touchdown run, and followed by Tagg's 61-yard touchdown pass to wingback Johnny Rogers. Wake Forest gained 62 yards of its 222 yards total of offense and late going as sophomore quarterback Jim McMahon pitched 12-yard touchdown pass with 53 seconds left. Next, Oklahoma, number 20 team in the country, beat Southern Methodist 28-11. It was a bittersweet day for SMU quarterback Chuck Hickson, who broke NCAA record for career completions to date with 506, previously held at 491 by Steve Ramsey of North Texas State. Despite 24 completions, Hickson suffered 4 damaging interceptions in first half, was trumped by Oklahoma quarterback Jack Mildren. Now, Mildren sneaked 1 yard and passed 39 yards to wide receiver John Harrison, for touchdowns within 61 seconds span. Each touchdown came after interceptions by Sooners linebacker Jerry Backus and cornerback Jeffrey Nordgren. But season's end, Hickson would end up his final record total to 642 completions. Stanford, number 10 team in the country, beat number 4 Arkansas in the battle of two top 10 teams. Number 10 Stanford beat number 4 Arkansas 34-28. Now, Indians quarterback Jim Plunkett wowed Arkansas with his short passes, most to running back Jackie Brown, who had 130 yards receiving and 11 catches. And it was Stanford linebackers like Jeff Seaman and Mike Simone who made game's key defensive plays. After Seaman roadblock third down play near his goal line, Simone, playing on sprained ankle, stopped Porkers quarterback Bill Montgomery a 4 yards shy of end zone on a fourth down keeper with time elapsing. So crafting nearly flawless first quarter at 21-0. Plunkett had set up 2 touchdown runs by fullback Hillary Shockley, who had 117 yards rushing on 20 carries and 3 touchdowns, sandwiched 17-yard touchdown blow to wide receiver Jack Laxter in between wide receiver Eric Ross. Made brilliant 61-yard punt touchdown return as Stanford built a 27-0 lead in second quarter, but edge turned out less than safe and effective until deep into the second quarter as Montgomery passed a pair of touchdowns each on fourth down that allowed the Razorbacks to get back in the game at 27-14 just before halftime. Stifling heat more than 100 degrees wore down offensive units in the second half, but the decisive touchdown came early in the third quarter as Shockley completed an 86-yard drive with his third touchdown run for 34-14 lead. And Arkansas got back in the game 34-28 by going 83 and 84 yards for touchdowns by wide receiver Chuck Dickus on an 8-yard pass from Montgomery and tailback Bill Barnett's 2-yard run. Finally, UCLA, number 18 team in the country, beat Oregon State 14-9 in 15 rapid-fire seconds in the second quarter. The Beavers grabbed a 9-0 lead with a safety on end zone sack by defensive tackle Mike Shannon and nose guard Bob Josses, followed by quarterback Steve Edencott, 52-yard play-action touchdown bomb to end Jeff Kohlberg. Instantly after receiving free kick, Powell runs up middle, set up pair of third-quarter touchdown passes from UCLA quarterback Dennis Dummett to tight end Bob Christensen. Now, Bruins gained a 269 yards rushing and got key breaks in third quarter when Beavers' fumble was heading out of bounds, but hit official which slowed it for recovery by UCLA linebacker Tom Daniels. Oregon State defensive back Jack Faulkner had interception deep in own territory in first half. Jack Faulkner had interception deep in own territory in the first half. That includes look at week 1, the games that were played on September 11th. One game, Missouri and Baylor, overall September 12th, 1970. September 12th was the week 1 start of the season. Going with September 11th, 1970 between Missouri and Baylor that was played on Friday. AP poll is September 14th. Number 1, Ohio State. Number 2, Texas. 3 was Southern California. 4, Stanford. 5, Mississippi. 6, Notre Dame. 7, Penn State. 8, Michigan. 9, Nebraska. 10, Missouri. The rest of the top 20 rounded out as this: 11, Arkansas. 12, Louisiana State. 13, Kansas State. 14, Florida. 15, Houston. 16, UCLA. 17, West Virginia. 18, Oklahoma. Number 19, Georgia. And number 20, Arizona State. So it concludes a look at the games that were played between Missouri and Baylor on September 11th, 1970. But overall, the games that were played on September 12th, 1970 for week 1, including the overview of the 1970 college football season. Please like and subscribe and comment on the channel. I do video of this magnitude tomorrow to continue on this journey through the 1970 college football season. I'll be talking about week 2, the games that I played on September 19th, 1970 for week 2. Until then, talk to you soon.